Hey guys, Tables here, bringing you part 2 of my Bravely Second jobs tier list. We're going to have 4 more jobs in this part, which is going to be the low tier. Before we go on though, I do want to make a quick correction on last video. I said that Ranger has A rank armor, and I got that from the Final Fantasy wiki, and I sort of got a bit suspicious because I thought, I'm not sure if it does. Checked in game and it's got E rank armor. So actually, Ranger's slightly worse than I thought it was, but I don't think it's enough to move it down to 30th. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say on that. So, with that said, let's get on to the first job in this list. Okay, rank 26, Black Mage. So, Black Mage actually does quite a few things quite well, and a bit like Monk and Valkyrie, its main issue is that it's just outclassed kind of completely in most things. However, since we're actually judging it for what it does do well, let's actually look at that. So, stat-wise, it's pretty solid, nothing too spectacular. It's got good int, good MP, which you kind of expect for a mage. S rank rods, obviously quite nice. No agility boosts, kind of a shame, but best possible magic scaling, again, kind of what you'd expect for a mage. So stats are nice, but they're not really exceptional in any way. Job command wise, Black Magic is alright. The main problem with it is that it's all single or group magic, and that doesn't get a big bonus from Spellcraft like group only magic does. And on top of that, it's quite expensive for what it does, so it can be a little inefficient. On top of that, if you pick Red Mage, Black Mage is just worse than Red Mage's job command until you get to at least level 5 Black Mage. That's level 5 Black Magic, sorry, so level 7 Black Mage. And you need to also get the Gar level spells, which you can't get until the end of Chapter 3, or very start of Chapter 4, depending on if you hit that checkpoint first. So it takes a while for that to get started. What it does do well though, the Ra level spells in particular are very good with hammer. You can easily be hitting for 9999 with a like 5 hammer, even like in chapter 2. It hits very very hard. That's a very nice thing it does. Asper, or Aspir, I don't know how to pronounce that, I'll call it Asper, drains MP from the enemy, and that got a big buff in Bravely Second compared to Bravely Default, so that can steal quite a lot of MP at once. And you can combine it with Spellcraft to get even more MP, and of course Good Measure. Combine both and you can easily be stealing 100 plus MP. It's not the best MP management, but it's pretty nice. There's also Drain, which is just kind of a similar thing but for HP. That does a bit of damage as well. The high level spells are pretty strong, but they do cost 45 MP. If you've got a good way of managing that, that's fine. There's only 3 elements though, which is not amazing, but you also get Dark, costs a huge amount of MP, 80, but again can be pretty good. Support ability wise, Black Mage offers not a huge amount that's too amazing actually. Rodlaw is surprisingly useful. A lot of people sort of overlook it, but there's a lot of jobs that are okay at magic, just have a low rod rank. If you give them Rodlaw, you can start doing very good magic with them. For example, Patissier, Catmancer, Kaiser. There's probably others I can't think of off the top of my head, but that's like 3 examples there. It's already like 10% of the other jobs in the game. So Rodlaw can be quite useful. Black Resonance, only good if you've got other black magic users. Pierce Magic Defense, that used to be very useful if you wanted a mage in default, but in second I would rarely ever use it. It sort of got indirectly nerfed because enemy magic defense now is a lot lower. So like at the end of default, enemy magic defense would often be like 150 to 200, and here it's often below 50 still. And 3 slots basically get effectively 50 extra magic damage. Not really worth it. Groupcast All can be very nice with some effects. A good example of that is with Astrologian, because you can groupcast all your buffs and get 30% like buffs on everyone for 1 BP. Or you can do the similar things with things like Status Barrier or Elemental Barrier. Black Magic level 7, which is Flare, is okay. It's a group cast spell, which makes it really nice. But it's sort of just a slightly stronger summon, kind of. So basically, Black Magic, it can be a nice job command for another mage. For example, Wizard, it complements quite nicely. Since Wizard has group cast magic, this has single cast. So you can use this for things like Hammer, and Wizards for like group spells, or spellcraft that's boosted by being a group effect, which is most of it. You can also use it for the Asper effect on pretty much any magic job. Thing is, it's usually not going to be your best option. As a main job, Black Resonance isn't great. Its stats are sort of just okay. It's not a bad main job. It's nothing special. That's pretty much the theme of Black Mage. It's sort of it does what it's meant to. It does magic damage, but it's nothing special, and that's why it's ended up at 26. Rank 25, Templar. So this is probably the first job which is low, not because it's bad or not that strong, but low mainly just because it comes so late and doesn't offer enough to make up for that. So Templar is the second last job you get. Meaning you only have sort of 2 main story dungeons, plus 1 side quest, plus post game once you get it. And it doesn't really leave a lot of time for it to do its cool things, but it does do some pretty cool things. So as a main job, its stats are mixed. It's obviously a tanky job, so it has very good vitality, HP, very good mind as well, so it can actually heal okay with white magic, kind of a weird thing you can do. I've done it once, it works okay. But of course 70% agility, that means it's firstly going last a lot, and secondly has a lower hit count, which affects its damage output. So Templars often actually don't hit as hard as you might expect. One funny thing it has is a magic scaling of 35, which is pretty good, but only 60% intelligence, so probably don't want to go magic with this, but I don't know, throw on Rodlaw and see what happens, I guess. It could work. Its weapon ranks actually though are quite good. S swords and great swords is not amazing, but it's okay. But also having A rank spears, it's quite nice because if you have 1 spear equipped, your group attacks do 25% extra damage. So you can sort of go 1 spear to other weapons and get that bonus. Armor rank, it's obviously the S rank armor job. Just got A rank helmet and shield, so yeah, it's got good armor ranks. The job command is it's got Rampart. That's the main thing. Rampart 3 BP total, 2 BP cost, and it provides 1 hit of immunity to everyone in the party. That's really good. Rampart can very easily save you from dangerous physical attacks, especially against bosses that use mostly single target attacks. Your Rampart will last quite a while and keep you alive for a long time, and it's pretty efficient to use, like 1 person with a job command. And the fact it comes at level 1 means you can actually do that immediately, which is pretty nice. Radiant Blast is a little expensive MP wise, but at this point you can probably manage it okay. And 1.75 times damage and piercing default is pretty strong. So it's actually a nice attack to use if you've got this as a job command. Desperation adds extra damage, it can be really good. And it also means you can go sort of a high defense build and still hit hard with Desperation. And finally, Heaven's Gate is fun, but it's not practical, unfortunately. You sort of need to go through a lot of hoops to make it work really well, and there's easier ways to do that. Support abilities wise is where things get very interesting. So, sort of Charm Immunity and Greatsword Lore, they're sort of generic. Greatswords aren't the best weapon, so you probably won't bother with that. BP limit up is fun, and there are occasions where it can be really good, such as if you've got a sort of a sporadic BP generation method, sort of random. This can sort of let you get up to that, suddenly getting up to 4 BP. That's with things like Fortitude or Revenge, for example. Speaking of which, Fortitude, fantastic ability. I think if Fortitude came at a lower job level and Templar was available early in the game, Templar would definitely be up in the top 10 jobs because Fortitude is really good. So its description says it's 1 BP whenever you're hit while defaulting. Well, it turns out that Knight's Iron Wall and Full Guard also trigger Fortitude, and that can start doing some really crazy things, because you can do things like Full Guard, and then you just gain like 3 BP in the turn, and you can then like Full Guard, attack a few times next turn, and still keep gaining BP. It's really crazy. And even more crazy is after doing that, if you have, say, a healing wall on the enemy, that counts as an enemy attack, so that healing wall hits you, and you gain a BP for being hit, which is just ridiculous. And hilarious, but also ridiculous. Other abilities here, Default Guard, and half damage you take while defaulting. That can be really good. It sort of means you're basically invincible while defaulting. And Weapon Guard is a damage reduction while you're attacking, which also is quite nice. Not as nice as Default Guard. No, in some ways it can be nicer. Like it's a way of reducing damage in its one slot. So yeah, Templar has quite a few nice abilities there that can combo with different things. The main one really is Fortitude. That's sort of the star of Templar. But the main thing really holding Templar back is how late it comes. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter really that Fortitude is good. Templar comes really late, and then Fortitude is a level 8 ability, which takes ages to get to. It doesn't have anything too amazing along the way. Yeah, it's okay, but because of how late it comes, you can only get 25th. Okay, rank 24 is Freelancer. So Freelancer is the first job you get, of course. Kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. But as it turns out, that makes it a jack of no trades. So let's actually look at why that is. Early in the game, Freelancer is actually quite nice. Having a B rank in all weapons means it can use the Moonglaive and Issei no Kami reasonably well. And that's quite nice, as they're your main strong physical weapons at that point. Unfortunately, Charioteer comes along and does that better fairly quickly, because it has much higher strength and it gains increased weapon ranks with them. But it's a thing it can do, and obviously it's available earlier. Examine, really useful ability. Seeing enemy HP is very valuable. It means you can time when to kill certain enemies, when to go full offense on enemies. A lot of bosses in particular start doing dangerous attack patterns when they're on low HP. So knowing that you can finish them off quickly helps a lot. Of course, it does get replaced by the magnifying glass item eventually, but that costs 100p. That quickly adds up if you're examining everything throughout the game. So being able to do it for free can be quite nice. Half-Seas early in the game is really good as well. 75 HP to everyone by using a Half-Seas potion is very good healing, better than anything else you'll have early on. Even once you get Bishop, 75 HP to everyone is probably beatable group cast heal. You'd need 625 HP to equal that with heal. Of course, you can good measure heal, which is 25% more efficient, so that needs 500 HP to equal. So even then, it's still kind of comparable. But you also have the option of doing Half-Seas High Potions, which is 250 HP to everyone, and you need a lot more HP than that for Bishop Healing to equal that. Support abilities wise, also then it starts giving you a few interesting things. Stand Ground can be very nice filler early in the game. Probably not going to be relying on it much later on, but a lot of enemies do end up killing very quickly. Things like Norzen can easily one-hit kill people. A few other bosses later in the game will have strong single physical hits, or even magic single target hits. Stand Ground, 75% chance of surviving them, can be worth it. Physical defense 20% up, not the most amazing thing, but can be really good for reducing damage. There's also Waste Not, which is good for conserving your items, which is very good with Patissier and Catmancer in particular, or anything really that uses a lot of items. You also then got Late Bloomer when you hit level 11. Late Bloomer is, the thing is, you need a lot of jobs mastered for it to be good, and that's really only happening right at the end of post game. And even though Late Bloomer gives a ridiculous boost, it's just boosting stats, so it doesn't always fit in with a good skill set combo. especially as it's 2 slots. So even though it's such a big boost, you may end up not using it. So yeah, the main thing with Freelancer, I'd say it's a weakness, is it stops being a useful job command after the early game, because it doesn't get anything new until square 1. And that takes a very long time between job level 2 and job level 9. You're going through most of the game, basically all it has is examine, which you can do with items, and half seize, which is flexible, but a lot of other sort of jobs can do better things. So it ends up being a little bit outclassed. And as a main job, it ends up not very good either, because although it has 100% in every stat, that's actually quite bad. A lot of jobs have obviously boosted stats, so you kind of want more like 110s, 120s in there. And it doesn't do anything well. It has bad hit scaling and bad magic scaling, so it doesn't hit hard with sort of anything. And of course it has no good weapon ranks. So all that together, it makes it a pretty bad main job. Late in the game though, square 1 can be very useful against things like the Sin Beasts, against a few bosses that sort of buff themselves or debuff you. Mimic can do a few fun things at least. The My Hero Mimic battery to generate 4 BP per turn is a pretty notable one. You can also mimic very expensive things to sort of half ignore the cost. For example, high BP actions like Heaven's Gate, or high MP actions like Amp Strike or Meteor. But there's usually better options for the MP ones, and the BP ones are usually not worth using a job command to mimic. Yeah, Freelancer does a few nice things, available very early, that's main good things. Doesn't do an awful lot later in the game, doesn't really combo amazingly with anything until you get Mimic. A lot of its abilities are sort of just filler for the most part. So overall, yeah, 24th low tier. Okay, rank 23, Kaiser. There's a lot to say about this one. I've been looking forward to it for a while. So, a lot of people think Kaiser's a really good job, and in some ways it is, and in some ways it's not. So let's start with the strengths. Stats are amazing. Its intelligence is really high, its strength is really high, everything else is plus 20%, which is really good. So it's fast, it hits hard, it survives. It even has a good magic scaling, so with Wadlaw it can be very good at magic as well. Because of its high intelligence, it can make use of weapons with status effects, such as the Assassin's Dagger or similar weapons. And of course it has 2 S ranks, not the most useful weapons to have S ranks in, but 2 S rank weapons, and A rank armor. Job command is where it really gets interesting though. A lot of the abilities in the job command are sometimes good, but very rarely will more than about one of them be actually that useful. And I think this is sort of where it sort of falls down. It has a lot of combo potential, but you really need to work heavily into the Kaiser job to make use of it. And most of the sort of combos you get out of it are not amazing enough as a job command. As a main job, it can still be worth it because of the stats, but yeah, that's the main issue. So let's have a look at some of those kind of combo abilities it has. Sonnenblume is very good if you're running either a slow party or using moves that have negative priority, such as Hidden Dragon or Jump. Jump's probably the most notable one because you can sort of jump block enemies by just using Jump with everyone. It does require a very specialized party though, and you need to get some extra BP from somewhere, I think, to make it work properly. But if you do, it can work very well. Spring Awakening, downside is that you heal your enemy as well by a huge amount, but since it sort of covers the healing, it can be nice if you want to run a team that has no main healer. Just throw up a Spring Awakening every few turns, and that takes care of your healing mostly. May not be enough on its own, but hopefully it will be. And then as long as you can out damage sort of the healing the enemy gets, it can work quite nicely. Winter Storm can be nice in 1 or 2 very specific circumstances, most notably against the super boss in the final post-game dungeon, where you can sort of lock him with Winter Storm because he keeps trying to heal. But yeah, beyond that, Winter Storm's not that good. So Noble Eagle, a lot of people really like this, and personally, I don't think it's worth the cost unless you either have a sort of a team that's set up to exploit it fully, or just for kind of grinding random encounters. And the reason is, if you give your opponents 200% attack, you can start dying very quickly. Like, unless you have very high defense, it's pretty much, if you get hit, you will die. On hard mode especially, because your enemies have such high attack there. So you need to be very careful with how you're using it. The main ways you're going to get around sort of how high the enemy attack is either preventing them taking actions, for example with things like sleep or paralysis or stop, or by using abilities that make them miss, such as undo action, Utsusemi, Rampart. But basically the idea is, if you want to make use of Noble Eagle in a boss battle, you better have some way of making the enemy not be able to hit you, because your defense will not be enough to save you most of the time. Random encounters, you need to make sure you're quicker than the opponents, because again, if they get a 200% attack hit, they will probably start killing people very quickly. But if you can Noble Eagle and then hit, say, 3 powerful 10k damage group attacks, you can just win. Overlord charges your critical special very quickly, and it's a lot safer than Noble Eagle, because defense sort of protects you a lot more when your opponents only have 100% attack, and you can just lower their attack anyway, which is even better. And it only affects physical attacks, so you can make more advantage than they can. Of course, if you've got mages, you can use critical hitter, that's what it's called, and then you can start critting with your magic as well. A fun thing you can do with that is using it to boost your healing as well, because you can suddenly do silly things like plus A plus items for all plus Overlord, and you can throw explosions that heal 6,000 to the party, which is kind of fun. You can do things like just let's say Benediction, you're now healing 80% when group cast, because it crits, so that could be quite fun. So yeah, that's the main sort of advantage of the job command. Probably the biggest issue in terms of the job commands is that they all require you to build around them, and that's okay, and they do really well if you do build around them, but that makes it quite specialized, and it makes it hard to use a lot of the time. And as a result, there's a lot less situations where you can make good use of Kaiser than you can of most other job commands. And I think that's a bit of a weakness for it. It doesn't help that when you build around a lot of these commands, they're still just sort of okay. Things like Spring Awakening, for example. You really need a team that's sort of exploiting at least maybe 2 of them to do really well. And that's quite difficult to do. It can be worth using anyway as a main job because of how good its stats are. But often the job command is more valuable than those higher stats, I would say. In terms of support abilities, Kaiser's really good for random encounters because of Cerberus, and possibly also Noble Eagle. Cerberus just means you can spam things like Amp Strikes, or Meteor if you're going for a magic job, and basically just win very quickly because you don't care about your MP, it's just being restored at the end of the battle. Not as useful in boss encounters because you're probably going to full heal before and after anyway, but yeah, for random encounters it's very useful. Citadel is pretty great because you can easily default on the turns the enemies don't lose BP, and when they do lose BP, often unless the enemy defaults, none of them will be acting, so you can sort of go all out. And especially if you can generate your own BP, enemies are only getting like 1 action every 2 turns. You can be taking up to 4 every turn, and that's just sort of insane in terms of how much damage you're dealing compared to them. And it only costs 1 slot. It does only come at level 8, which takes a bit of time, but it's pretty great if you do get it. Overall, Kaiser does a few cool tricks, and it has very good stats, but the job command is quite specialized and requires you to build around it, and it comes very late in the game, which is another big issue, and that's the main reason it's ended up at 23rd. It just comes a little bit too late and doesn't quite do enough, especially not until the higher levels, for it to get any higher than I'd put it, I think. Okay, that's all for this part. I know the Kaiser part was very long, but I think there's a lot there that needed to be said. Hopefully you found it interesting though, and I've maybe given you some ideas of ways you can make use of that Kaiser abilities, and also why I think it's not as amazing as sort of a lot of other jobs. Next part will be quite long because there are 6 jobs in the next tier. They're sort of all jobs that I couldn't really pry apart very much. So I'm hoping to get that out soon, but we will see. But until the next part, thanks for watching.